Hello, everybody. It is 4:34 p.m. on January 8th, 2024. And we are kicking off the January 8th meeting of the Portland, Maine Board of Education Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee meeting. I am the committee chair, Sarah Bryden. We have with us committee members, Board Member Opperman, Board Member Figdor, and Board Member Knorr will be joining us soon. We also have with us Board Chair Sarah Lentz. We have a number of staff people with the gangs all here. So excited. We're going to talk about so many great things. First, I'm going to check and see if we have anybody in terms of attendees who might want to give public comment. Sometimes there are 0 attendees today. There is 1 attendee. So, in the spirit of providing an opportunity for public comment at each of our committee meetings, I'm going to just do the quick version of the public comment guidelines. Members of the public can speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, not personnel matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students. There's a separate established policy and procedure for dealing with those. Folks can talk for up to 3 minutes, 6 minutes if somebody's using an interpreter. And the 3 minutes is for the individual, cannot be relinquished to another speaker. Committee members are not going to respond to comments. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disruptive conduct, things like using vulgar or obscene language, threatening, pejorative, or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor. Making defamatory comments, exceeding allotted time limits, talking over or interrupting others, offering repetitive comments, or offering comment on matters unrelated to the school district's programs, policies, or operations. If anything runs afoul of those rules, I'll stop public comment. If you want to speak in public comment, raise your hand in Zoom. You would start by introducing yourself with your name and address. I'll keep the time, let you know when you're almost done. And I will now look for any raised hands.
Sarah, I just wanted to say that
yes,
if Sarah may be in an attendee.
Oh, that is possible. While I'm wrapping this up, if somebody could check and see if that's Board Member Yusira Ali and move her over. I do not see any attendees with raised hands though, so I'm going to close public comment. Okay, so now the public comment is closed. We are going to get on with our agenda. For today's agenda, we have 4 topics. We have CIP capital improvement, monthly financial update, and an ADP update. And then 4th is a high-level overview of strategic plan initiatives. So, with that, I will turn the meeting over to Superintendent Scallon to get us started.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you were able to survive or really enjoy the snow yesterday. We're excited to be here and to have school here, and just, it's not technically in this topic. I feel it's really important to just mention the work that the facilities team did to make sure that schools were ready and open today. Including custodians that worked literally through the night. We had one custodian who slept at a school because that's what it sort of took for them to be able to be at their school and to have it be ready. And so just a big credit to them. And like all things, right, this was the first big snowfall of the season. And so a lot of folks were taking out their snowblower from the garage that hasn't been used in a year and found out that it was ready to go or that it needed a little bit of tune-up. And so we saw that similarly, as well as our partners at the city. And so we've certainly received the feedback about the sidewalks. That's work that we do, that we actually don't do, but that the city does to make sure that there are clear walking paths. And my understanding is that as the city fired up their equipment today to get back out there this morning, just found some equipment challenges and first snow of the season. And so sidewalks weren't where we necessarily wanted it to be. And they were open to the feedback, and we're continuing to work on that partnership and that work together. So just wanted to, one, thank everybody, and also just acknowledge that some kids had a long hike to school. So I wanted to just name that. Tonight, we're going to start by talking about our capital improvement process. So we did an update with you at the last committee meeting, just to share with you some initial thinking. And tonight we are sharing with you a final recommendation, and we're going to ask that you take a vote to formally move it to the board for their consideration at our January 16th board meeting. And so I'm going to pass it to Dr. Sarah Warren, Tamara Sweeney, and Scott Watson, who really lead this work and will walk you through the process. Emily, do you have a question first? Yeah.
I just have a quick request. Is it possible to upload what the final proposal is in board docs, so just we can follow along in board docs as well as through the presentation?
Yeah.
I personally like to see the numbers, and we'll go back and forth between slides and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to share with me, just reshare with me so I have the exact right one, or Tamara, the file, and I'll share it?
Thank you.
Do you have it, Sarah, or do you need me to send it?
Well, I was just trying to share the deck, and I'm struggling with that right now. So if you could maybe share the document, Tamara.
Yep.
While I see if I can get the deck to come up. Sorry, Zoom and I don't seem to get along. Let's see. So essentially, last time that we met and shared this or thinking with you, we talked about a list of facilities related priorities. Many of them were older CIP projects that we wanted to update you on the progress. And we talked about how we're working to expedite the completion of projects that have already been approved in past years. So that work continues. And I think Tamara and Scott and team are really doing a great job in general of trying to expedite maintenance and facilities related projects, and CIP is just another sort of bigger piece of that. We are thinking about whether there's a creative way that we might invest to put some more staff behind that, staff capacity to support the project management to help continue to keep that work moving, especially as we look to potentially add even more projects for the coming year. We did hear the feedback from the committee the last time that we should not be shy about the requests that we were putting forward. And so the spreadsheet that you'll see in a minute is actually not unlike the one you saw the last time. It's a little bit updated, and Tamara can walk you through that in some more detail, but it is really the $3 million version plus a little bit of what we were looking for. And again, the focus is safe, warm, and dry. So there are lots and lots of other capital projects that we would like to do, could do, but that would take us even higher. And it's not only probably financially not feasible, it's not feasible for us to complete that many projects. So we really are trying to stay focused on the things that we think are most essential for supporting the safety and the quality of the learning environments that we're creating for our students and the work environments for our staff. So that remains the focus here. Ryan, are you able to share it?
I just put the Excel file into board docs.
Okay. Okay, so let me pass it over to Tamara then.
Sure. I updated at the bottom of this section. I put together all the the stages of an approved project and how all the way at the bottom, the stages for you so that you can see how they, staged out, and then the dollar amounts attributed to each one of those stages and where we are in the process. I'm hoping that is what you guys were looking for, and that's
Excellent. Thank you.
So that's where we stand at this point. Some things are in the middle, like some things we might be close from approved to design. We're like in the middle of it, but for the most part, that's where we are in all the projects. Does anybody have any questions? We kind of went through this last time, like in more detail, and we can still, if you want to see any more projects on the different stages we're in. Anybody have any questions on that, or do you want to go straight to the CIP proposed? Okay, if you can go over to the proposed CIP tab. So on this slide, it's all the, I think this is the proposed one, but can you slide down for a second? Because I can't. No, so that was the original proposed CIP that we then took that and went and did a warm, dry, safe from that list. And so it's recommended tab. Yep. So the recommended tab is where we went with the warm, safe, and dry, and that's at our $3 million mark. That's like Lincoln Middle School replacing the boiler, Casco Bay underground wiring, more middle school secure entrance vestibule, and so on. Deering High School has some server issues for the camera system that need to be upgraded, some masonry. Longfellow has some masonry. And then some more security things at East End, and a couple schools need some more upgraded door access control. So our proposal is to go forward to the city with this ask right here, in regards to priorities of safe, warm, and dry. So does anybody have any questions on our proposed list, or?
I do. Well, and this is a follow-up from a question and a conversation that we had last time. With the Lincoln Middle School boilers, I'm wondering if there was any research or looking into, because we had talked about heat pump type technology. And the reason why I'm asking is I want to make sure that, if we're going to spend $800,000 on something, that we're not necessarily locking into, also being at the mercy of fuel costs and things like that, and just wanting to get a sense of what may have been done in terms of research on that.
I asked around. I didn't do a lot of research on it. It was during the holidays, so it wouldn't be what I could say would be that we could say HVAC replacement and then do more research on it and not be locked into doing the boilers and doing it another way. Now, I did do a little bit of research in regards to asking around and how, putting heat pumps in all those rooms and how the power infrastructure would look in that particular school. And I believe there would have to be a lot of electrical upgrades done. And when you start getting into that, then you start getting into other code issues and having to upgrade other parts of the school.
Yeah.
So that's just that's without doing a lot of research.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And, and just to reiterate, I think what I hopefully said last time, you know so much more about this than I do. And, when I say heat pumps, it's really shorthand for, are we putting in the right, sure, the right type of technology that's going to serve us well now and long term. And obviously it's a balancing act in terms of spending now and spending later and that sort of stuff. But I just wanted to make sure that that's, part of the analysis when decisions are being made. Sounds like that's true. So I'm good. Other questions?
Just to clarify on that point, though, what I heard Tamara say is that we could change the language in that line to broaden it a little bit. Does that sound right to you? So it's more about an HVAC upgrade and
yeah.
That gives us some more flexibility.
That sounds great. It sounds also like the boilers are like the Lincoln Middle School boilers need to be replaced with something because they're not what we can continue to use much longer. Is that accurate?
They're at the end of their life,
Yeah.
the end of their lifespan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I thank you, both Tamara and Sarah, for this conversation. I think it's a really good one. And I agree that changing the phrasing to essentially say new heat system or however it needs to get phrased is the right direction.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from folks on this? Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not fast enough on the raising my hand
I saw you.
Zoom option. So I just want to make sure. So first, I want to thank you for being responsive to the conversation about ensuring that we're asking for as much as we need and can get done from the city, and ensuring that that we know that what we're asking for doesn't meet our need, but that it's what we can, I believe. So this is my question. I just want to make sure that, because in looking from the proposed to the recommended, there's a lot of what I see as important projects that drop off the list. So I just want to make sure, and I understand the framework of safe, secure, and healthy, or safe, secure, safe, warm, and dry. Sorry, getting the lingo, and appreciate that, that theme and prioritization. But I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly that what we're proposing here, in addition to the projects that we have ongoing from previous years, is essentially the maximum that we can take on. Because we know there's a lot more facility needs. I just want to make sure that what I'm hearing is we have a lot of a lot of projects from the past that we need to make our way through. We're in the final stages of finishing up the BFOF projects, and then we have this new tranche of projects, and that's essentially our capacity to move these projects forward. Is that right, or is it the case that we would, if we had additional funds, that we would have additional capacity to make some of the building improvements and modifications that are needed?
I don't believe we have the capacity to do any more than what we're proposing. Yeah, I mean, if you look at that first spreadsheet and how many dollars worth of stuff we still have out there, that list doesn't even account for BFOF in those dollars. So.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to test my understanding. And I personally feel very comfortable with this recommendation based on that.
Can I add?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I add one piece of additional color that we probably should have put as a timeline on the front of this? Is because Board Member Figdor, I think it'll be helpful for your question, is when the city will review this and then go forward with a bond issue, they will likely do that in about 9 months. So it is not the case that the work will kick off immediately, but that the process will. And so one of the things that Tamara, Sarah, we've all been talking about is how to really drive this work and get it moving, especially now that Tamara and Scott are fully here and immersed. So we're going to see. We may come back with a more aggressive offer or more aggressive proposal a year from now, based on our facility needs. But this is what we think we could put forward and both be like good financial stewards and not be borrowing money that we're going to sit on for a number of years, and also making sure that we're doing the best that we can for our buildings.
Super. Thank you. That's a really good addition. Board Member Opperman, I see you, but I just have one quick little follow-up that I also wanted to clarify from this last bit of conversation. Just so that, anybody who's watching this in the community after the fact, and so that the conversation is grounded in a really solid understanding of how this is all working. Superintendent Scallon, could you just go over, like in a couple sentences again, the city involvement? So I just want to make it super clear that we're not asking for money from the city. It's not that. This is a matter of how we're financing these things, correct?
Yes. So the city takes capital improvements from both the school district as well as city departments.
Mhm.
And then they will take the total amount and take it out to bond
Mhm.
and get financing for it. Similar to you would for like a mortgage for a house, right? And then we will pay our portion of that. And
Mhm.
so where you will see that is at the end of the day, we're responsible for those bond payments. And so it does impact how we think about what our overall budget is, what the right mill rate is, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you so much. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question of looking at the original list of proposed under Lincoln. There was one about hallway configuration. I wondered, is that something that increases the safety of observation or travel in the hallways, or is that maybe another kind of renovation?
Can you click back over to that, Ryan, for me on proposed? So I can see let's see.
It's free work corridors and
So
lockers.
that came out of the assessment in 2017, 2018, and so it's landed on here. And I think it's just I can't really speak to that until I dive into it, but I believe, if I remember right, it's the way the hallways are configured in like their lockers and stuff. Maybe they're reconfiguring them for, you know what? I'll have to come back to you on that because I'm not totally sure on that one.
Well, just knowing hallways, lockers, and students bumping into each other, and that kind of thing, which doesn't sound like, they should not do that. But in middle school, that I think can just aggravate some situations. So I don't know what it is. That's why I asked. So yeah, I appreciate knowing, because if it is something that's going to make it students able to manage their traveling from class to class more easily and safely, I would think that's like part of the safe piece. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying on the safe. I think we were thinking safe when we're talking about like safety of the school, the building, in regards to like secure. I mean, you could make a case probably for every single one of these items if you really dove into them.
Oh, I know. And it was looking over the whole list, and I thought you selected a very good group of items from the proposed or reduced, and understanding your limitations. That was just one I wanted to just make sure it wasn't just ignored or not brought forward because it was, painting and fixing lockers, or was it actually reconfiguring it so it's a better travel space? That was my experience of having lockers outside my door of my classroom.
Yeah. I can dive into the assessment a little more and take a look at it.
And it could be next year if we don't feel it is, but other than that, I think it's quite a fine list. The final one is fine. Thank you.
And then, so I have a question that it is not necessarily going to impact the matter of voting on moving the proposed list forward, but just to have a general sense and awareness. I'm curious about the cadence of reviewing the backlog, and if something's been on there since 2017, that's not great. But I'm also curious if there are ever items that come off of the list because they are deemed no longer necessary or irrelevant for some reason, and whether that is a thing that happens.
So I would say a lot of these items on this are from the 2017, 2018 assessment. That's how many of them were driven to begin with from the start.
Sure.
So they kind of continued on the list and kept on, as you look at the 5 or 6 year plan, they just kind of down the list. And yes, things come off if, when we had the elementary school, the BFOF renovations, items came off the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. So to make sure I understand, Ryan, you are wanting us to vote on if we could just move to the recommended tab again? The intent here would be to have us vote to move that list forward to the full board. Is that correct?
Yeah, just looking for my mute button. Yes, that would be that, or if there's anything you want us to do in terms of revisions.
Yep.
As well, and or any additional information you'd like us to bring. But
Sure.
really, it's to vote.
Okay.
To move it forward.
Okay, so I will ask among committee members, are there any items that you don't feel comfortable with that you'd like to discuss changing? Okay, is there any other information that you would need to feel comfortable about moving this forward?
No.
Super. Board Member Figure, it looks like you're about to.
I was just going to say, make a motion to approve the CIP as recommended.
Wonderful. Read my mind. Yes. Super. And I'll look for a second. Super. Thank you so much, Board Member Opperman. All right. So I'm just going to change so that hopefully I can see everybody. Super. Okay. So I will look for a show of Hi, Board Member Noor, welcome, just in time. So we are going to now vote. Board Member Noor, welcome. Board Member Figdor has just brought forward a motion for us to vote on. So basically what we're voting on is whether we want to move forward the staff recommendation of proposed capital improvement plan items to move forward to the full board. And then from there, in theory, what would happen is that this list would go over to the city to be included in their bonding process. So it's essentially, financing capital improvement projects. So show of hands, committee members, if you're voting yes on the motion, please raise your hand. Wonderful. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And I think, does that close us out on the capital improvement topic? Wonderful. Monthly financials is next, correct?
Monthly financials is correct. Helene, if you would like, I will share my screen. I think that was a yes.
Yes, thank you.
No worries. So everybody's seeing the. Here we go.
Here we have, as usual, we're looking at everything through the end of December. We're halfway through the year, if you can believe it or not. So we're 50% through the year. One of the things I did notice, which seems to be kind of the situation, not only with this year, but past years, is December seems to be kind of a slow year, and it's probably because of the 2 weeks that the school district tends to be closed for winter break. So I just did that with a quick calculation as far as just determining a little bit of the lag. So I'm not concerned at all as far as the slight lag that we see compared to what we saw the first 5 months. So I also double checked with some of the grants. When I looked online, we're still waiting to see for the federal grants. We're still haven't gotten those approvals on the federal side. So something I'm not used to, but we're just still chugging along and just keeping an eye on everything. So Ryan, if you want to go on to the next slide. Again, here, operations, you'll see we're overall slightly under budget on expenses through our 6 months. Of course, the only one is still that number 4 other, and it's just that purchase that we made at the beginning of the year. Everything else is still in line with previous years as far as the general fund is concerned. And as if you keep to the next slide. the same thing happens with each of the other funds. On this one. So you'll see some of the expenses look a little bit on the high side, but again, we don't have all the budgets to be able to show what the true amount is, budget to actuals, because they haven't been all approved by the state. So, but again, using the previous 3 years as a guide as how we look as far as spending is our way of guiding us through that. And as you can see, we're pretty much on target as to where we've been in the past for the last 3 years. And if you keep moving forward to the next, same thing with these. The only other budget actually I put in on the for expenses is right there on top. That first one is the IDEA. That budget just came in. When I did look, I actually realized I didn't put on the revenue side, now that I think about it. But that one did come in. When I checked it last night on the DOE website, I did see that the award money did come in. So that helps show us kind of like we're in balance. And then overall, I think this screen is, I don't know about your view, but my view is kind of like widened. I think on the bottom of this row right here, all I see the last line is workforce, but below workforce is the grand total. Is there a way to shrink it a bit?
For what it's worth, I can see the grand total.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's me.
Helene, for the grand total, just voice
here.
support here.
Yeah. The grand total, that includes everything, including the general fund.
And the grand total year to date percent used is 49%.
Yes. So again, that's budget to actual, but also if you look at our actuals and you compare our actuals and what we increased our overall what we gave out as increases in earnings for our employees from previous to this year, the difference is about 5%. So when you look at the increase, that's about how much you'll see in the increase from one year to the other. So we're very much in line to our previous year.
Thank you so much. And just the quick question, follow-up question on the, you were talking about the federal grants. We're really just at the mercy of, like, there's nothing to do about that, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like they come in very, very slowly.
Okay.
Which is very strange that we're halfway through the fiscal year and we're only about, with a few grants of approval, right? You know, and with IDEA being one of our bigger grants, as you can see, it's 2.1 million. That one just recently got approved at the state level. I checked. The only reason why I even have the title grants totals is because of our director of Title I. She gave me about an estimate of what we expect to have. That one hasn't even been approved yet by the DOE. So this is an estimate that we have right now. So I was just trying to give you that way there wasn't this unsettling of we're spending this money, but we don't know what we're budgeting.
We know it's coming, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So especially with those bigger grants, you know, there's this who wants to spend money when we don't know how much we have to spend. So, you know.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you as always for all of this information. Are there other questions from folks? Okay.
No.
Okay, super. Wonderful. Okay. ADP. Can't wait to hear an update about that.
Couldn't tell if you were really excited.
I know.
Or,
It's always a combination of genuine and sarcastic, always.
It is actually exciting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. I will also tell you that what you see on the screen when you look and talk to Helene and Barrett and others on the finance and HR team is also that it's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so we're at the spot where there's been a lot of work to make sure that the system will run. And we're now, tinkering with it to make sure it runs and runs as well as possible. And so folks in the last 2 weeks did an amazing job of making the transition. So our hourly team, right, is now clocking in a different way than they have in the past. And we did an individual review of every timesheet, and folks did an amazing job of doing that, both the staff as well as the school leaders and the lead secretaries, to make sure that the information is there. Because if the information's not there, the payroll engine can't run. And so it was I wouldn't say it was a huge learning curve, but it was certainly a change. And so folks have done a great job with that. And so we're at the spot now where we're taking all of the data that's in the payroll or the time management side and pulling it over to the payroll side to actually run the final checks and benefit, all of that piece that actually gets people paid. That takes the calculator of what you did and then what you should get paid at the end. And so I anticipate that there will be a couple of very late nights over the next couple of days as we continue to pull over that information and are spot checking to make sure that everybody's right. And so we're on track to have our first pay go out this Friday in the new payroll system. It's also the case, and I say this every time, is we took 1,700 employees and hundreds of pieces of data, and data that oftentimes needed a lot of cleaning and a lot of updating into a new system. And so I still anticipate that there will be hiccups, and that we will see that we need to make some adjustments, and that we're going to work through those. And so I feel good about it. It will be a busy next couple of days, but just a credit to Helene and Barrett and both of their teams for what they've done. We do have, just as like a quick update, there were 3 sort of outstanding pieces at the end of last year, or 4. One was around pay, right? So that has now been updated, corrected, and we have an ongoing ticketing system. The second is around accruals. And so accruals have now all been updated and are entered into the system, and ADP now calculates them based on your role, title, et cetera. Before that was a manual process. The third is around voluntary retirement. So all the voluntary retirement payments, our understanding and our belief is that they've been made. And it was always a question of the outstanding lost interest. And we have those calculations and are now just waiting to load them to individuals. And then that'll leave the last one being Maine PERS, which the great news is the teams have been working really close with ADP to make sure that Maine PERS will be able to run directly out of there in the future. But we're still reconciling what is the state data and our own data, and using Barry Dunn for that. And so hopefully we will have an update for that at our next committee meeting, and a good one. But we're making really good progress on this. And ADP paying folks on Friday will be a great step forward.
Super. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. And over the year, it's been for all the people who are new and older, past members of the administration team have worked so hard, and it's been difficult. And I thank you. I've been sitting on pins and needles, waiting to hear how it goes. But I feel pretty confident from what you're saying. I mean, the detail of how you just explained the 4 major issues, and the fact that the staff has jumped in and made sure things work, because that ultimately is where it has to start with their data input. So thanks to them as well. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the team. I mean, one of the great things is folks can see more easily their own data in the system, and to be able to flag what is right and where they have questions.
Mhm.
So that's been great.
Board Member Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the sentiments that the superintendent made, and school board member Opperman, and just say thank you so much. I know it's just been a tremendous, tremendous lift, and I'm really optimistic about the changes that this will bring. And the efficiencies and systematizing things in a way that we haven't had before. So I know how much work has gone into this, and I'm very much prepared to see the first run with grace, understanding the transition and all that that entails. So just want to say thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any other comments, questions on this topic before we close it out? No.
Colleen, Barrett, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah.
No, I would just say I echo everything Ryan has shared, and Helene too. They are working super hard. We were doing just to be a little lighthearted, we were doing a like office hours with some of the leaders and lead administrative assistants, and Ryan was demonstrating how they needed to do something because he's very good at managing ADP and has all the tools. And for a while, I didn't even have access to show what he was able to show. And so they were like, oh, even the superintendent's doing this. And Ryan was like, come on, guys, of course I could do this. So, it is a steep learning curve, but it is a really nice system and it's looking really good. And I think, there's growing pains with all new things, but we'll get there. And I feel really hopeful that, all the work we've put in and the changes we're making, it's only getting better and better. So thanks, Ryan. And props to Ryan and Helene for all their holding with all of this.
Me too, Barrett.
Okay, so now it's like 100% excitement, no sarcasm. So excited.
Yeah, and board member Figdor said it right. Like the first one's not going to be the Super Bowl, right? And we're going to need to adjust quickly when some folks have payroll challenges that we didn't anticipate, and we'll keep going from it. But I think we're in a spot where we can do this pretty fast.
Yeah, super. Sounds like a great approach. Okay, are we ready to move on to strategic plan initiatives?
We are. If it's all right with you,
Yeah.
And the rest of the committee, I'm going to say that the Helene, if you want to jump off, you can certainly jump off. And anybody else who needs to jump off, you can also stay. There's nothing secret about it. Just I know Helene is in the middle of an ADP go live session, so I just wanted to have her have that space.
Good evening, everybody.
So we ran our first focus group with the draft strategic plan initiatives with our family and community partnership group this morning that's facilitated by Grace. And I would say that the focus group went great and gave us really good feedback. And so I just wanted to reorient you to it. I've shared it in board docs as well so that you have it. And so I'm going to do a quick run through of a couple of things and then share with you how I'm thinking about the budget impact and how we'll look at it. So let me just share my screen here. So you've all seen this, but just a reminder that the strategic plan is not being completed in a vacuum, but that it is being done with a layer or several layers of feedback, including the executive committee, which is senior leaders in the district, the steering committee, which is approximately 16 members of community partners, staff. It has student, it has an alum, captures community partners, sort of all of the groups. We're doing feedback sessions now. And at the end of the day, we will be asking you as board members to put your stamp of approval on it. Just a reminder where we've been, right? So in the summer through December, we got feedback. We looked at our data, and based on that, we had an organizational diagnostic that was created. We use that to then serve as the start for our strategic planning process. And we are now in January where we are getting some initial feedback. And then in February and March, we will be sharing, we'll be finalizing and then sharing it with you. I anticipate sharing it at our March, I don't have the date in front of me, but the first board meeting in March, along with the superintendent budget. So you get the alignment between the two. We've talked about this a number of times, but we got feedback, both looking at our performance data. We had individuals visit our classrooms to give us feedback about what was happening in the classroom. And then we got feedback from our community through listen and learn sessions, as well as a survey. So I'm just going really fast. And it resulted in some key strengths, as well as challenges that we as a district had to address, right? And this is not surprising. Every organization that goes through an organizational diagnostic should have things that are strengths to build on, as well as opportunities. And one of the things that became really clear as both the executive team and the steering committee engaged in this is that we are on the journey, right? We are not starting from scratch. There's a really great amount of work. And now it is about how do we take it further. And so in that idea of taking it further, there were 5 key priorities that were identified by the steering committee. These are draft at this point. And so right now we're getting feedback from focus groups along these 5 areas, as well as around the initiatives that underlie them. And so I'm just going to leave that up for a minute to give you a chance to read it. And then I would love to get from you anything that particularly resonates, where you have questions, like where the language isn't clear. Don't worry about yet, what is this? We'll talk about that in the next slide. But first, what resonates? And then where do you have questions?
Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
I'll just say what resonates first is I appreciate that when we talk about equity and keeping it in the center, of course, for me, I think it's essential that we're building on our past work. I really appreciate that we specifically use the goal of becoming an anti-racist school district, because I think there's real clarity. Sometimes equity is thrown around a lot, and I think we can lose perspective on what we're talking about. So I just appreciate the use of becoming an anti-racist school district is what we're striving to achieve.
Yep.
One thing that jumped out at me, as I'm reading through, they're all such important. I mean, just how interconnected everything is. You know, you can't do one of these without the others, you know, and they all sort of build on each other. And I'm really impressed with what's been identified and, you know, and how important everything is. So that was the loud thought in my head. Other folks, anything you want to share?
Great, I'll push this along because we're going to look at. Go
Board
ahead.
Member Figdor, go ahead.
I've raised this with Ryan already, but I on the whole student connected community, cultivating inclusivity and belonging. I just want to make sure that we're really strategic in ensuring that as we're looking to change culture around our discipline practices, and that we're incorporating those in this priority, because I think it's how we treat our students is so critical, especially when our students are struggling or acting out, is so critical to actually successfully changing our culture and creating schools where students feel that they belong. So that is a big one that as we get into the details, I'm going to be really looking for.
Board Member Ali, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. What stood out to me and that I resonate with is enhancing academic excellence and equity. And those two things will go hand in hand. And I'm very, very excited to see how we execute that in a way that empowers each student to achieve academic excellence as well as feel supported in areas where they're lacking or they feel not comfortable, as well as not used as as a, identify what is the challenge in different student demographics, while also keeping the equity in the center. And I'm really excited how that's going to pan out. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the other comments, and one I want to hold in the center of equity and the academic excellence and the inclusivity is ensuring that those who are, we would call it in the challenged special needs categories are as aware and made as alive and up front as all other groups, because I think, that is a real need in society to appreciate and to support and to assist the development of each individual to their maximum potential. So that's the piece I'm doing. And the other piece is the word staff well-being. That to me is, if the staff is not well, the students are not well. Because I'm talking to one of the student reps, talking about teachers who just don't seem to like what they're doing and don't seem to like their students. And I've heard that over the years many, many times about various sundry people. That there are lots of reasons for that, and ensuring that there's the support for the staff, social emotional support for the staff, will ultimately be social emotional support for the students. Those are important to me. So thank you.
One of the things that actually came up in the focus group this morning was somewhat aligned to the last bit of your comment, Dr. Opperman, around the piece of making sure that we're supporting and developing staff and making it a joyful place to work. Because we believe that if we have people that are really happy, that are really committed, and are supported, that it results in better outcomes for students, right? And so it is in service of that end goal of really supporting students. That was a big topic in the focus group this morning. So there's more that sits beyond this, right? So these are the sort of 5 high-level priorities. Within each of them, this is an example. So this is not ours, as you can see by the years, but within each of the priorities, there's a number of initiatives that will sit under it. And those initiatives are where we really start to get into the meat of the work, right? Of if we really are centering equity, what does that mean we are doing? We think of the work in the strategic plan as being along 4 things. So any initiative, right, could go through all 4 of these phases or 3 of these phases, right? So the first you'll see when we look at it is around research and design, right? So it may be that we know that we really need to focus on our high school students that are learning content as well as English at the same time, because they are our multilingual student population. And so we really need to research what is best practice in that. And then we may need a prototype or pilot, and then we need to launch and implement the work, and then make sure that we're monitoring and continuously improving it so that we don't just launch something and then have it fizzle out after a couple of years. And so each initiative will go through this. And so what it means is that when you look at a final product of our strategic plan, is you won't see 95 actions under it, but you may see that in the first year, we are researching and designing around these 5 initiatives. And we are launching these. And so it staggers out like that, similar to how you see it here, where not everything is launching in 1 year.
Can I ask a quick clarification question? So you said some of them would only have 3. It's prototype pilot that might not be included, correct?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yes. When I live this so many times, I feel like I say the same thing over and over. But yes, exactly right. So there may be certain things where we feel ready to go to scale. Mm-hmm. And there's other things where we may pilot it. It may be that a pilot may last for the second half of the research and design phase, right, of that year. Most of these things, the first 3, research, design, prototype, pilot, launch, and implement, we're generally thinking of as year-long pieces, with the deepen, monitor, and continuously improve as the ongoing work then after it. So yes, it is the prototype and pilot that is the one that may not exist for all initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The one piece on looking at the previous slide, as it slides along in the scheduling, is that as we want to build another and start and launch another particular phase or brand new product, that's a lot of lift if you haven't gotten past getting to the abilities to sustain the previous ones. And I know you're planning this to be a living document that has some adjustments in one way, or additions, some things may go more quickly and more easily. But that is a concern that I've heard from many different sources, teachers, parents, students, that it's, so many new things happening. You haven't quite, as I said in the last board meeting, it takes a while, more than 1 year to actually get something going under your feet, make it firm. So I think this is a good way of looking at it. I think if it's that many launches in all 5 areas, that's a pretty big lift. But it's a plan, a strategic plan. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I echo what you said, and I would probably go a step further, which is one of the tensions that we're feeling as we're digging into this work is about our end implementers, right? Our leaders in buildings, our teachers in classrooms, our facilities team, about their ability to do, right? Because if we think about individual departments, they may have the bandwidth to develop, but it's that elementary school teacher that teaches all of the subjects that can't do it all brand new in 1 year. And so we're really trying to think about how do we stage that, and knowing there's so much we want to do to continue to enhance the experience for our students, that it's like that give and take. And so really thinking about what is the most pressing. And so just being sensitive to time and the structure. So I just want to go through each of them. And the way they look right now, I'm just going to orient you on this slide and then we'll go through each of them, is on the left is you see a repeat of the priority. That's the same language we looked at when we saw all 5. And then in the gray box is the key draft initiatives right now that the priority would address. Okay. And so you can think of that first one: develop and implement a plan to advance adult mindsets and cultural humility in support of equitable outcomes and experiences for our students. That's an initiative that we would spend time doing work to design, that we may prototype, and that we would then launch and then monitor that work on an ongoing basis. Same thing with the second bullet and then the third. And so that's what you see here for just that one. These things would not all happen in the first year, but would really be thought about what's the staging and the prioritization and the sequence.
Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
I guess one thing I'm not clear on is how these initiatives dovetail with work that's already underway. So for instance, on this slide, the last bullet, so the resolution that we passed last year that I believe that we're working to pilot and then move forward to require that all of our educators have some level, some kind of ESOL certification based on the relevance, based on their role. Clearly that would fit under that third bullet. And so I'm just wondering how initiatives that are already we're already working on dovetail with these initiatives.
Yep. So I think there's sort of three broad ways that I think of it. There may be some initiatives that have been working in the district for a long time that this strategic plan will cause us to say, maybe that's not the right work, right? And there may be some things that get paused. There will be a lot of things that are continued work, right? That may get named as a sub-bullet here or some of the key actions because we want to continue to enhance and drive that work. And so the resolution that the board passed last year, right? That is one that if I shared a different version of this where we could see some of the staging, you would see that the pilots that are happening right now around ESOL certification and training and support is building the groundwork for launching that bigger. And so, right, so there's some things that may stop. There's some things that are fully captured in here that may be enhanced or maybe exactly as they are and just continue. And then the third is that this will push us to do some new things. So there was a lot of conversation in the Listen and Learn with our multilingual families about the types of academic support they would like to see available for their students, including in home language and homework and other supports. And so that may be something that is an enhancement. And so those are where I think there are, right? And so one of the things that your question makes me think of and came up this morning as well is how do we make sure that we show what's current work, right? So that people don't think it's all starting new. But how do we show that things like restorative justice, which you talked about earlier, the ESOL certification, that work lives in here because we're not starting from scratch on it. So I don't know how to capture that yet, but that's what we're thinking about.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. A follow-up to what Member Figdor brought up is what as we continue things and how things are placed within each of these categories. I appreciate what we've been doing this year as far as saying things are on track or the measurability on all of these pieces. And so correct me if I'm wrong that the statement might be made, things may be mentioned under it, and some of it may be on track already, some of it may be off track or perhaps eliminated for whatever reason, but that we would get a measurement of that regularly. That's a big lift, but I think it is, as looking at plans, SMART goals and all those sorts of things. It's a concern when you have a big undertaking like this. I think I think it's a great start on all of it.
Yeah, and I think there's two pieces so our progress monitoring would continue into next year and would be aligned with where we're at on the priorities and whatever initiatives are getting launched or monitored, et cetera, that year, right? So you would see that. The other piece is, and I'll try to articulate this clearly, is right now a lot of our work doesn't have end metrics. in student outcome, right? Because one of the things that we're trying to build up this year is around our data system and around how we're measuring student progress throughout the year. And so not just at an end of year assessments, but how we're doing it throughout the year so we can provide updates that clearly show the alignment between action and impact on student learning. And so there is a final piece of work that happens after these initiatives are relatively landed on, which is around getting to what are the end measures that we are going to see and hold ourselves accountable for in terms of student outcomes. So everything from, graduation to test scores to the school climate survey work that we do to how do our staff feel, right? And perception surveys and all of that. And so you will see that it goes beyond just like work and updates on action steps, but actually gets to what's the impact that we're seeing.
I have a couple of questions, but now I also have a third one to follow up on what you just said. I'm curious about whether the metrics and, how do we measure success? Is that something that Attuned might be able to help us with? Because they started at the front end and, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody a little removed to be able to give that perspective. Super. So my other two questions, I'm curious about whether there is a way, the answer might be no, but whether there is a way that's been identified to be able to identify work that crosses, that hits more than one of the 5 priorities, because I suspect there's probably a lot. Is that something that the team has been looking at, or are we just going to there's this one piece of work and it really could fit under 3 different priorities. We're just going to pick one and go with it.
So can you talk a little bit more about, because that's one of the struggles that we've had, right?
Yeah.
And I think you talked about at the beginning is that the 5 are very much a Venn diagram and there's a lot of overlap in them. And so we're trying to think about where to best place the work and where it sits in terms of priority may not necessarily impact how we implement it, because we're still talking about who owns the work, who's responsible for making sure it happens. But so there is that piece. And the other thing that doesn't come out really clearly in looking at it this way is what's not getting prioritized, right? And that's a comment and a conversation that we often have with the steering committee around, well, what are we saying we're not doing? And so we may need to put out some information that says, here are things that are really important, right? Don't get me wrong, but we're not prioritizing in this.
Yeah. Okay. That is helpful. And it also, it's a nice lead into my third question, which is more specifically around prioritization. Because, as you said, this is not all work that we're going to do in the next year. It's, long term. So I would love to hear a little bit more about so 2 components of the prioritization conversation that I'd like to hear more about are whether it feels like there might be waves of prioritization, like prioritizing which items get to go through the design process first. And then also when you get down to more granular pieces of, okay, this initiative or this pilot or, those sorts of things will need to also be prioritized because you can't do everything all at once, obviously. So there's that. And then also when you're looking at prioritizing at different granularity levels across this mountain of work for a 5-year period, you can't just okay, here it is. It's the snapshot and it's what we're going to do. There has to be room for evolution and revisiting and all that stuff. So if you could talk about those things, that would be super helpful.
Yeah. So let me talk first about the second part of your question. Yeah. So part of the reason that we're not laying out the 95 action steps, right, that sort of live in all of them is for exactly that reason, right? So, and we're trying to do it in a sequence where the year before something launches, right, there is a cross-sectional team that comes together that says, all right, let's look at the research. Let's make sure that we're building on the practices that are having impact already in our district. and what are the key things we are going to be training folks on, supporting them on, developing, implementing, et cetera. And so we're trying to create the space there, and knowing full well that it's sort of us as a collective that is going to say at some point, look, I think we need to deprioritize this and adjust our strategic plan and add this. And so what I've always thought of that as is like the idea of like agile pursuit, right? So our goals at the end are locked, right? These are the things we're driving towards, and we may need to adjust our plan on how do we get there. And so that's the hope. And then even after implementing something, that last one of the process isn't just monitor, it's also revise. And so we don't want to do that just for the sake of doing it, but we do want to look and see what's the impact and how could we tweak it, adjust it to have it be even more impactful. So that's one. The second piece, to your first part of your question, is we have 5 priorities. Each priority has somewhere between 3 and I think 5 initiatives that sit under it. As a district, we've talked as a team, and we've talked with our leaders that we think there's a sweet spot of about how many things we can take on at any time. And depending on how big they actually are, it's somewhere between 3 and 6 new pieces. And so when we get to a spot, and we haven't gotten there yet, where it makes sense to get feedback on the sequencing, right? Because we're at this first stage, but we have started to look at if these are the initiatives, what's the sequence? And so we've started to create a draft of that, but we'll come back to you to get feedback on that, because you may say, look, actually, this one needs to come before this because they're interconnected, or this one's just much more pressing. And so that's really actually, I think, a lot of the February feedback group sessions that we're going to run.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions, comments, reactions? Okay.
And so I'm thinking about time. We have about 10 minutes. Maybe what I do is go through them real quick and give folks a chance to read them. They're also up on board docs now. And so you can read them there if that's easier for you. And then have the same 2 questions, right? What resonates and what do you feel like is missing or you have questions on? So here was the first. The second one, as you can imagine, is a really meaty one because it is about the academics. Yeah, Board Member Figdor.
I'm wondering here how these initiatives dovetail with some of what we learned from Attune's work in the run-up to working with us on the strategic plan, in specific the need for particular focus on middle schools, and also the feedback, the work finding that our implementation of the curriculum that we've rolled out so far is uneven.
So part of that I'm going to take as feedback. Part of this would also change the way that we thought of the implementation if we were to go back in time. So the way we're doing the implementation of our EL curriculum this year was really based on the idea that in 5 years, everybody needs to get to here. But you could sort of pick your own sort of path to get there. It's really difficult to support that work as a central office team and to do it as effectively as possible, and to then bring together people to collaborate across district buildings, right? Because they're doing different things. And also based on the feedback from Attuned, who leads this work in a lot of districts, does exactly this. Their recommendation is to simplify it and to really work with all schools on the implementation of a curriculum and not go sort of piecemeal where everybody picks their own adventure on it. And so we took that feedback and did it as part of this is our approach to the work. So we have previewed to school leaders that this will likely push us to all be on a very similar path, which actually is a much more equitable experience for students, because then it ensures that everybody is getting access to that high quality curriculum as fast as possible and not waiting. I'm going to take the piece that you asked around middle schools as feedback, partially because what I'm thinking about is our calendar of rollout over the next 5 years is really going back and looking at how is middle school getting prioritized and sequenced in that. And I just don't remember in the draft, but it's a really good point. So if I can push us, I'm going to share the second. So I was so impressed during early listen and learn sessions when we had opportunities to talk with all of the partners that support students across Portland. And was reminded of it again this morning when one of the things in the feedback session that came up was around really thinking about this work as not just Portland Public Schools, but maybe even having one of the early initiatives be to really define how we engage effectively and how do we partner effectively with our community of nonprofits and other supports in this area to do this work. And so I say that all to say that initial feedback, and I think something that really resonated with me was around thinking about the we in this and not just Portland Public Schools.
I like that approach.
So I'm going to push us.
Just say I'm really happy to see the second initiative especially after reading the Attuned report.
And just to reiterate or just I think I know the answer to this, but just by way of confirmation, as this work continues, that's when we get down to sort of like the SMART goals, right? So like strengthen onboarding for teachers, like, yeah, that sounds great. And then further down in the weeds is the metrics and the actual, like the work of the actual work of how we're going to do those things, correct?
Yeah, I'd say there's two things. One is we'll get to metrics of exactly how we're measuring it before we'll get to actually defining some of the very specific work, because that last bullet, for example, which is like a good one where it's like really broad, and what does it mean, is we're going to define some metrics based on our TNTP survey, right, of teacher perception and feelings of support, as well as our own observations of how they're doing in it. But we also have one of those phases, right, which is around design and develop. And so it may be that we say, here's the end metrics that we're aiming for within this, and we don't know exactly the actions we will take until we go through that phase.
Okay. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
The third bullet, one thing that I just want to make sure that we are very cognizant of is our educators of color report from a couple of years ago, and just fully understanding and continuing to learn from the fact that it's one thing to recruit educators of color. It's another thing to retain them, because we need to change our culture so that our staff of color belong and are supported in ways that help them want to stay in the district. So I just want to make sure it's not just about getting people in the door, but really specifically supporting our educators of color, so that they stay and we can build on their great work.
You had shared a similar comment to me before, and if I have it right, if I could play back to you, what's sticking to me is the fact that there's not in that third bullet the words retention strategies, right? And like that's the piece, right? I always think about like our best recruitment is our current folks, and it's about really strong retention strategies. And so that's what I think you're naming in here, right? Is that it's not just getting them in the door, but then supporting them. And so it's about the retention and development strategies as well.
Yeah, and retention is in the very end of that bullet, but it's just like a real specific acknowledgement around our staff of color, that they've completely, that they've struggled in the district the way that our students of color struggled in the district because of systemic racism, and I don't know that we can fix that unless we specifically call it out.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I say the same things over and over.
No, clearly you need to do that a couple of times with me to like have it stick. So I appreciate it. So thank you.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Yep. To piggyback on what Member Figdor said, absolutely. Retention of staff, retention of good staff, of color, of all staff, that is what builds a community within the school. The sense of people coming and going all the time is disruptive to the students, and the students, where we want students to be known and recognized for who they are. It takes a while to know them, and if the person comes and goes. So I think that's retention critically important.
Agreed. So let's see, we're at time. Am I correct in assuming there's one more slide?
There's one more. If I can just do a quick, just put it up there so folks can see it.
Yep, for sure.
Folks watching at home, they can pause their screen and read it longer than we'll necessarily spend on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just struck by, a lot of this stuff is the less flashy, less exciting, but just so fundamentally important. Process nerds among us are super excited about this stuff. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Yes, hallelujah on this part, because as you said, it's not glamorous, but it's critical. And when it is not working, it starts to show where we have weaknesses in our system. And I think I appreciate that. And then again, I'm a data nerd myself. Before we close for the evening, I did want to make one comment. There was a couple things that were in a few places earlier, the MTTS, PBIS, and restorative practices, initiatives and managing those and all, particularly the multi-tiered systems, that the real understanding of how those work, and I mean they've been around a while, but how they work and how they are supported and how the teachers and administration and students are supported within that is makes or breaks it. And I think it's a real it's one thing to have them, but to have them well defined and the supports and resources necessary to provide that structure is important. So that's something that I just caught in a couple of them. Thanks. Otherwise, this is great stuff.
So thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Again, this is a living doc, both now in the process as it's getting developed and after it launches. But you will start to see some of the sequencing over the next month, and then how that starts to appear in the budget in terms of helping us identify priorities, in terms of where we are going, and how we want to get there. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. And that closes us out for our agenda, correct?
That's correct.
Wonderful. And we're only 3 minutes over. It's the dinner hour. I want to be very, very mindful of everybody's time. And I appreciate that for many of you, it's been a long day. And just to reiterate, from snow removal to ADP to all this, all of you staff folks are just, I'm very, very appreciative and impressed and thankful. So I would look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Board Member Opperman. And a second. Thank you, Board Member Figdor. And show of hands, we're going to adjourn. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everybody.